Okay. All right. So does anyone have any questions that I can address or anything that you want to talk about? And then again, I want to say that all of you have your own experiences and are adult learners here. So if you all wanted to chime in, obviously with your own experience, whether it be with the assignment or outside of class, it's totally fine too, because we're just having a discussion.
I have a question about the article, the professional journal article that we're supposed to find and share with a classmate.
Yes.
Are we supposed to choose someone in class to share that with, or are you going to submit those out to people?
Really good question. So if you haven't noticed, I'm trying to give you all a variety of experiences so that when you design, you'll know. So to answer that question, Canvas has a peer review feature that does automatic assignment of your peer. So what will happen is that once you submit your assignment, after that due date, the system will automatically buddy you up. And then when you log in, you'll be able to be like, oh, okay, I got Sunday's paper. Now, there's also a feature where you can make both sides anonymous, but it's not high stakes and not necessarily personal information that I figured it would be probably better to know who you're talking to. Yeah. So that's how that will work. And I'll also remind you all of that in module 4. That way, because it's going across weeks. So I have to confess, that's probably one of the things that I like least amount of Canvas is their peer review feature. Because they, for example, give you when things are due for the assignment, but then they're like, okay, but then we're gonna send it to a peer after it's due, but not really have a feature where you can say when it's due. So that's not necessarily my favorite thing. But I'm still on the look. Maybe they'll change it. Maybe if anyone else knows anything about it.
I was going to say, to follow up on that question, if we submit it early, will we get matched with somebody early, or we have to wait until that due date to then have it? It's the second one, right?
It is the second one.
Okay.
The reason being is they just want to, and that's why I even kind of set the due date for matching back a little bit, if you notice in the system, so that it gives people who are kind of skating in with a little late assignment some more time to be matched. Because I think if people don't hit the due date, I potentially might have to then go manually to assign people to someone. But but I'm hoping by giving you all maybe, actually, I think I gave you all another week, then that hopefully will give you enough time to do the peer review. And be kind to one another. Yeah.
I have a question. This is Milan.
Hi, Milan.
How are you? Can we save if we can save like a PDF document of the article to make it easier for a person who's reviewing or does it matter? I mean, we're gonna cite it anyway, but to make it easier for them to find it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, if you already have it there to attach in your response.
So just attach it then.
Right.
Okay. Perfect.
And then that way, yeah, people would just have to save a step. So that's a good question too. I'm assuming that if, for example, you were able to find it to read it, that someone else who's following you could also be able to find the same article as well. If you all are finding articles that you're like, I paid for this, then let me know and we can maybe figure out something for your peer too. But this is one way that I think, you all can kind of, so who was I telling? Andrew? I think I was telling Andrew this too. He's on the call, and I have a couple, I think, yeah, and the other Brian too. Sorry, not Brian A, but Brian, I think M, that I was meeting with. So the assignments, I hope, give you all some breadth to be able to look for things that you're interested in and things that are applicable to you, which in reverse can also kind of be uncomfortable because they may not be as defined. But I would rather err on having you all do things that interest you than not. But yeah, so that's what I'm hoping for.
Hi, Brenda. I have a question. It's
Yeah.
Amy Joyner. Hi. So I'm wondering how to the interview that we did with an instructional designer
Mhm.
gave us the guiding questions. So I have I reached out to somebody, but I'm wondering how does that translate into a like I guess report? Do you know what I mean? Because we're not like just putting the questions. How do we translate that into like
Yeah,
what are you
sure.
wanting us to do? How do you want us to format that?
That's a really good question. I would say more like a journal style,
Okay.
like, on I'm almost thinking like a news article from a first person perspective where,
Okay.
on Wednesday, January, oh my gosh, that was yesterday, 27th, 27th, I interviewed so and so, and
Okay.
I was thoroughly enlightened what, this person does, or I didn't think about it this way, or, it kind of matched what I thought. I was talking to someone earlier this week and they were like, they didn't really have any good responses. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. But that's also enlightening too, because this person interviewed um was put into a position where they just kind of have to do whatever's thrown at them, and they don't really know why to a lot of questions. So she was like, I'm gonna write a report about the videos instead. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, cool. And I hope you enjoyed the videos too, if you all watched them. Um, yes, Candace.
So mine kind of goes on to Amy's, because Amy, I thought the same thing actually. Sunday, is that, hopefully I
Yeah.
pronounced that correctly. We were talking about it, whether you wanted, because at one point you said a report, and then at the other point you said a reflective. So I was like, okay, does this have to be a reflective essay, like with a thesis statement, or you just want us to give our feedback, but not, I guess, regurgitate material that she said?
Right. Like I don't necessarily, someone emailed me today about, do they need to submit, oh, excuse me, Emily, yes. Do you need to submit the transcript or a recording of it? No, I want to hear it processed through you. And the reason why I hope, anyways, I being from a language arts background, I know like a report can be different from an essay, whereas with the essay, it's a stronger arguments. Um, but if I had to choose one or the other, I would say more of a reflection.
Okay. So
Um,
reflection essay, essentially.
right,
I'm English,
right.
yeah, I'm English background too, so that's why I'm
You know
asking.
what I mean? Because like you can reflect, but we all have our thesis, whether or not you want to admit it or not. Like this was, this was spot on, and this is what I went in thinking, and no, I got proven wrong on this. So, but still, yeah, thank you for understanding that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Amy. I'm glad that makes sense. About the explanation there. How are you all doing? I mean, I have you as a captive audience right now in a sense, but I don't want you all to go away thinking that I don't appreciate you all and realize that you all have your own lives to live, and we're also still in a pandemic. And for some of you, this is your first time in grad school. Some of you, it's not. but at the same time, we're all going through things. So I hope that my feedback. I mean, I try to. So every time you see me say as a help, that's Brenda's padding to make sure that nobody gets hurt. But the more direct feedback that I hope that this is a safe place for me to be able to give you feedback about things, to hopefully again really help in thinking about things, processing things, so that in the confines of this class that we're really, I mean, our relationship is to learn instructional design. Does it really matter with everything going on? Probably not. But since we're here to focus on that and to help out, but also understanding that things are challenging. So I do appreciate you all for your work, and if you are in circumstances, always let me know. My goal is just to give as much information to you as possible to empower you all, and then to just get everything wrapped up by the end of the semester, so you guys can be really proud of yourselves for that. And we're going into week 4 soon, so haha, yay. Anything else? I mean, I'm not gonna just like shut it down right now. I mean, people can think and talk or whatever, but yeah, Chris?
I have a question about the needs assessment.
Yeah, sure, shoot.
So,
Yes.
part of the needs assessment said that you needed to interview some of the learners and stuff. So I interviewed 2 faculty members, and I've gotten 5 responses from learners so far.
Yeah.
So writing that in the needs assessment, I mean, 7 different people's interpretations so far. Like, can I just add like a appendix chart on it and then give my reflection of what they said? Or how do you want that tackled in the needs assessment?
Yeah, sure. So and forgive me if people that I've met with, you're hearing this again. So the needs assessment right now has to look a little bit more formal, and it does look more formal to you because you think of it like as in pages and sections and things like that, and as a report. But I will say that my goal again is to have you all get into that mindset of what I need to do when I meet a need. So what I'm trying to say is that even though you're doing this more formally for the needs assessment, ultimately you may be in your work conducting an informal needs assessment, and it's like a 1-paragraph email that you basically have to synthesize everything that and tell people. So, but for the cases of, you doing a more formal situation where you interviewed people, you can definitely put your findings as an appendix in the back, but I probably would in the needs assessment basically do some of that first level analysis where you're like, these 7 people said 7 different things. I went in thinking, and let me know if I'm on the same page with you, where you went in, you might have thought that there was a need, but after you interviewed these 7 people, you're like, man, they're all saying different things. So that then
clear.
that
It's the same need that I thought. It's
okay.
really clear. So
You're like, this is abundantly clear. So yeah. So I don't necessarily need like the whole transcripts or all the notes that you took, but to say that the 7 people, yep, we've identified the same need, and then you might be able to then write a little bit more about the nuances that might have been a little different than what you know. So then that can be your report. And then
yeah, I thought like if I could put like an appendix at the back with like the survey results and stuff like that, and then it would give me more time in the actual needs assessment to like reflect on that and kind of do deeper thinking on it than just saying, well, person A said this, this, and this, person
right.
B said this, this, and this.
Right. So to Chris's point, I am expecting more of the analysis and the reflection versus then you giving me all the results of your findings. And then so ultimately, I mean, I want you all to focus on submitting this needs assessment, but then also this I hope would be part of a concepting portion in your portfolio. That way when people are interviewing you and talking to you, they can also know that you're capable of identifying a need in the company. I was talking to someone, and sometimes you're going to just be thrown into a situation where your boss is just going to be like, or your principal investigator for your research product or a grant study might be like, I just need you to go figure out what the need is out there. And then that you have this experience even though it's not necessarily going to be a huge experience, because I'll admit, like what you're doing right now for a full research project could be an entire course itself. Like we could just conduct an independent study, and that would be pretty much the whole semester. So I do want people to kind of think that this is the confines of a few weeks in an 8-week class, and that you all can see, okay, well, I'm curious about this thing. I found out about a need. I found evidence supporting that this is actually a need. And then as you all probably have thought about and experienced, that it just can't end there. You have to then think about, okay, well, now that we've identified who is it a need for? So that's your learner analysis. And then even how can we, meet this need? And then that's your context analysis. And then how do we actually achieve what we're going to be striving for to meet the goals? And that's going to be more of your task analysis. And you're going to, if you want to watch, anyways, I'll have a module 4 intro video that kind of also recaps the needs assessment experience. So you'll hear that again. But the goal of that is to kind of get the critical thinking going. So I totally understand that, I've assigned chapter 2 when the needs assessment was originally assigned. Now that it was extended, you might have gotten chapter 3 with the learner and contextual analysis reading. And then some of you are like, well, how do I do a task analysis? Because that's not till chapter 4. So and thinking about that, two things. One, that I didn't want to drown you guys in reading because it is a pretty rigorous class already without being like, here, read 50 pages in 3 chapters, and really understand all these analysis. Thanks. So the idea was to focus on the needs assessment. And then as long as you guys can address the questions in the prompts, that's all I'm looking for. And I think describe the learner. I mean, I think anybody can do that. So as long as you're kind of like just answering those questions in those sections, that's fine. Some of the another point, if I'm just gonna keep giving you all these tidbits. So if you need me to stop or anything like that, just let me know. But another thing that I've been seeing that people have been struggling with is organization. So I would really, look at the sections and then just kind of plug things in. I know it's going to be super kind of cookie cutter, but I think ultimately it's going to help you process information because one, I'm, if it matters to you, I'm immensely proud. No one's necessarily taking an easy way out. I think from most of what I've read and seen and heard, you all care about these needs that you're identifying. You care about the people that are related to it, and you want to COVID, pandemic, education, how do I fix that? People are struggling, how do I fix that? People have real needs, how do I what do we need to do? So a couple of things. I wouldn't let the solution, again, if you saw my video, I wouldn't let the solution kind of blind you from what the real need is. And then also what you're doing is going to be complicated. So I think that's also why organization is a challenge, because it's really hard sometimes to divorce, well, is this like, how is this needs assessment different from this contextual analysis? So I would say that, yeah, it's going to be challenging because you guys are thinking about like if I was just like going with the book, make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, then you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, totally, I can do that. But the more complex your problem is, the more complex it is going to be to take it apart. So as much as you can, stay with the terms, look at the descriptions in those paragraphs, and it should help you with the organization. And ultimately, if I know you all are worried about your grades and how it'll be evaluated too, I'm just going to give my honest feedback. And if you want to get better, you always are welcome to resubmit. And so that's just so I don't want you to have a fear of failing either. I think this is a class, you're graduate students, so at the same time there should be that rigor, but it should also be a safe place for failure. I mean, that's what like companies now are also seeing too. If people aren't being able to fail, then you kind of almost paralyze yourself, and you can't really go to the creativity that sometimes can't occur until you kind of not necessarily like fail, like you guys are gonna get zeros if you really try, I mean, but not necessarily achieve what you really wanted the first time. That's what I'm trying to say. I think Brian had the question about resubmitting. Yeah, sure. So any project in this course, again, because you're graduate students and I want you to have, I signed up to try to give you all as much feedback as possible. I will be honest that I am trying to do it in a timely way. I know I still have the instructional versus learning theory essay to get you feedback on. But I thought like the needs assessment problem and then also looking at people's individual needs assessments were probably more important at this time for now. But again, I still will get that feedback back to you by the end of the week. My hope is that I would never be more than a week behind. And if you need anything sooner, let me know. So to elaborate, if you all are feeling like, hey, I'm doing this needs assessment, it's for this class, but it's going to be actually for the company that I work with, or I really want it like rocking in my portfolio, or I'm working on a grant and I really want this to be shown too. Actually, I know another person who in her school, she's going to use this to go to her principal and be like, this is, it's not working. And I did this project to justify why we need to do something else, So I'm happy to give you feedback. And if you want to go back and edit anything that, might have caused points to be taken off, you can resubmit it. And then in Canvas on the technical side, I can see that assignments have been resubmitted and then regraded, if that is something of concern. I do know that there are a couple assignments that people have done and maybe they just read the prompt wrong and they're going to resubmit and I'll regrade, which is totally fine with me. But there are two things. I'm just going to say it. Probably nobody on this call is going to need to hear it because one, you're actually in this call. But the reason why I hesitate sometimes with resubmit, and any professor would, and if you've been in teaching, you kind of probably have that same feeling, is because you're going to get those people who are just going to submit something, probably not their best work.
Mhm.
Take your time to get them feedback and then change it, So it's within reason. So I'm going to put that out there. And then, yeah, so that's what, but from what I've seen so far, everyone wants to at least do a good job. So I'm there to do that with you. Yep. Brian, I hope that helps. And Candace, the format of the needs assessment. Yep. Okay, good. Brian said it helped. Pretty much just those sections. I'm not necessarily asking you all to do any kind of formal template. So if you just
Okay.
go in and you're just like intro, needs assessment,
Yes. Right.
learner and contextual analysis.
Because I was almost breaking it down like a lesson plan when I was thinking about it. Like this is my introduction, this is what I'm doing. And I didn't know if you wanted it in a formal essay that you would give to somebody.
No, more of that report style in this case. Yeah,
Okay.
this will just be like, this is what I've knew, this is my reflection on things, this is my conclusion. And then to Chris's point earlier, that then if you have anything that's more data driven, that can be in the appendix. Because I do know some people have put in interview questions and for those of you who are, on a thesis track of sorts, whether you're earning your master's or your PhD, EDD, EDS, I hope this could potentially relate to your ultimate goal. So something as an advice that was told to me when I was in graduate school, maybe you need to hear it too, is when you have assignments like these, try as much as possible to not waste your time, in a sense where, if you have a thesis or something that you already are like, listen, I wrote my entrance essay to get into grad school for this and I want to end up doing my research on it. Is it going to be it? I don't want you to have that pressure. But if you already have a direction, totally feel free to tailor it to it. So that way you already have your data and your analysis. And even though I didn't require IRB for this needs assessment, so the Institutional Review Board, where you basically are like, no one's going to be heard when I ask these survey questions and all the, all the consent there and things like that, you at least can kind of point yourself in a direction. And even if you retroactively need to do an IRB, that's usually fine. And then two, if you also want to use the information to at least make your dissertation clear. I'll be honest, when I went in, I changed topics. So instead of blended learning, before I was wanting to help English, I mean, I still want to help, but my primary dissertation was more on English language learners. And then that changed to STEM and blended learning. And then when I came up with that idea, I can't even tell you how many rounds where they're like, that's too broad, that's too broad, that's too broad. And even after I did my dissertation, they're like, why'd you do 2 case studies? Because I was like, you told me to. And they're like, oh no, you only really needed 1. And that was painful. That was really painful. For those of you who know what that experience is like, that means like potentially 120 hours of my life didn't need to be in a certain way. So yeah. Okay. So I hope that helps, Candace.
I have one further question
Yep, sure, shoot. Chris? I think that was Chris? Oh no.
about that.
Yeah.
I forget what it was, like intro, where it's like underlined or bolded, or how does APA work with that?
Okay. So those of you who are familiar, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that was probably one of the areas that people across the board needed some support with. If you all haven't gone there yet, Purdue OWL is a great resource for APA formatting. So if you do APA Purdue, it'll take you to their website, and it basically kind of helps you to break down that APA manual. For those of you, I'm going to digress a little bit, Chris. I would say I'm probably either older or about the same age as many of you. And when I was in grad school, I kind of realized that my method of learning, and Sunday, I think you would appreciate this because you were in library sciences, where, not that I was like, well, maybe in elementary school, it's like Dewey Decimal System, but when I got older, you go to the databases and you go and you find your books and things like that. But I had a classmate of mine who was younger, and she had never physically found a book in the library before. And so I'm not going to pretend that you all have seen an APA manual, but it actually is like a circular bound book that's about this thick of how people can find APA things, from like journal citations to like how you cite your papers to table of contents and all things like that. So I just want you all to know that exists. And then when you go to Purdue OWL, you can actually go into more specific areas so that you can do the searches and target and find your needs.
It also has a sample
Yeah.
APA page that you can see how it's done. It has a one for education and one for like the corporate world that has like abstracts and that kind of thing on it. But you can actually see, and that's helped me a lot with your papers, because most of the citations work that I've done has been MLA.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
For my undergrad and grad degree. So I'm having to learn along.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, ultimately, I want you all, whether or not you get your master's, or I mean, if you're here for the certificate, super cool. It doesn't mean that you guys won't be on research projects.
Mhm.
And so many of the journals in our field are APA format, and so to kind of give you a leg up, even I know this is super painful for some of you, because we all took typing, and I think some of you are very used to double spacing after periods. So I had to like start telling people like, hey, you want to start getting into the habit of single, because you don't want like a 15-page manuscript coming back being like, hey, can you guys single space this? I mean, I might as well break that habit now with like a 2-page paper. So hopefully that helps. So Chris, to answer your question, if I remember APA citation correctly off the top of my head right now, the first heading should be, I want to say it's bold with initial capital, with all the main words capitalized and left aligned. Your title will be center aligned, and I think potentially in all caps. But there's also usually a title page, but as you probably saw in my notes, I'm not asking you guys to do a title page or even the running head with the pages. So you just should start off with that first level of body heading. And then I think the next level is that the first word has an initial capitalization and the rest of it is lowercase. And then I think potentially the third is like when it gets italicized. So, but when you go, oh, thank you, Jessica. Let me see. Did I get that right? Center, boldface, uppercase. Yes. All right. Okay. I think I was pretty close. So yeah. Oh, third one also should be indented. But Chris, no matter what, if you go to APA, type in Purdue, and then go into headings, you'll actually, this is helpful, but I know like what Cindy was pointing out, seeing it also helps out too.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks, Jessica, for that too. She's like, girl, I got you. All right, so let's move on. I'm so sorry. I think some people asked some questions while I was speaking. Oh, and then Erica or Chaewon. Yes, that's correct. That our Purdue link is what I'm referencing. I think I'll go in order of the questions. And so there was a direct question to me from Brian about, are there exemplars of needs assessment somewhere online we can reference? Let me see if I can get those to you. But again, my goal wasn't necessarily to be like, this is how a needs assessment is. Because I'll be honest, if you go into any company, they might have like, this is how we do needs assessments in our company, but it's not like APA formatting where it's like, this is the format of needs assessments. But I will still try to get you some references for sure. And I could probably put that out in the announcements because I think people would be curious. But again, I just want to hear what needs you found. And frankly, this is not necessarily the focus of the course, but I think you guys, the reason why you're emphasizing it so much too, is because I think you're also seeing as an instructional designer how important needs assessment can be. Like, because if you don't know what the need is or the learning objective that you need to create to meet a need, then you don't really know what you're doing. So I think that's good for sure to kind of already get into that feeling of like, I need to know what problem I'm solving so then I can create a learning experience for it. So yeah, I can put that in the announcements so more people can see that. So Glenda asked, I was, yes. The due date, yeah. If you guys still want to send me things that I can give you feedback for needs assessments, I'll definitely be happy to do that. You know, again, part of that learning experience, you know, if I see that, you know, you're really trying, and, you know, we all need a little grace here and there in life. So if, you know, you're really trying, you're just hesitant about submitting it, I'll be happy to. And if I don't necessarily get it back to you in time for the due date, we can kind of talk about that too. But the reason why I think everything should go well, because people are like, oh, you know, if I do this, then I can get extra time. Not that I'm saying that you're trying to do that, Glenda, but I mean, if someone was trying to do that, then it only ends up hurting people more because you still have other assignments that are coming. So I think as much as, you know, you guys can push off your plate within the due dates, then, you know, that will leave you less stressed. So I hope that helps, Glenda. Okay, great. And then Erica, you shared that link. Jessica shared that information. Abigail had a citation question as well.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So I was wondering if there is precedent for, or if it's appropriate to cite a Canvas course, not like slides within a Canvas course, but the shell and the design of a course itself.
Oh, that's interesting. Are you citing it like the text, or are you like doing a screenshot of it?
A screenshot, I'd say.
Okay, then I would probably cite it as an image.
Okay.
Right, Cindy? I would probably classify it as
That
an
makes sense. Thank
Yeah, and then just credit it as the course, who the instructor potentially was, what year it was created, and then usually just the link at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. All right. Chris says thank you. All right, Erica. I tried looking for them, and there are many, many different ones. Erica, can you help many different?
Oh, I was referring to the need analysis online. So I did to look for a different template if possible to see what it should look like.
Right.
And I found community ones, I found the learning educational ones, and even within the learning educational ones, they don't have a really template. It was just many different ones. So I was just referring to the earlier one. When we were searching for it, I was just like, I don't know. So I'm just gonna go with whatever the text said.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. So I don't want you all to think that there is a universal needs assessment template. It's not something like that. It is really meant to be more of a mental exercise, like, okay, can you identify this category needs assessment? Can you do like, so I think it's misleading in a sense because the words sound like super official, like task analysis. You know, I almost wish they would be like, you're analyzing what tasks need to be done to meet your needs. And if you actually look at the various ones, which I think you did, Erica, you'll see that that's actually what it is. Some people might have called it a task analysis. Somebody probably could have called it something different, but they're, because I really appreciate this conversation that I had with one of us yesterday, and it was kind of well, we can have this little exercise here too. Can someone give me a need that you've identified?
Training scientists to do outreach.
Okay, cool. Training scientists to do outreach. So, okay, all right. So in this umbrella term, so Brian, we're gonna do this. All right, everyone, here we go. So when you said training scientists to do outreach, like how do you define outreach?
Virtual visits to a K-12 classroom.
Okay, so see what I'm doing. So even just this little interaction, he had an initial question, but if he did that, that would be quite some time. So now we're already pinpointing like virtual classrooms, right? So you kind of already are gathering information for your contextual analysis. So now when you've identified the virtual environment, you're going to need to know like what's conducive to a virtual environment. For example, if you're like, all right, well, it's virtual, I'm going to make these 12-hour videos, then that's probably going to not work. And then that kind of starts going into your learner analysis to be like, okay, well, who's going to be in these virtual environments? And I'll ask you that, Brian.
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, sure. So when you're saying that people are going into the K-12 virtual, correct? So who's all involved in this process?
So I guess it's a combination of the students, the
Yeah.
teacher, and the scientist that's visiting that classroom.
Great. So then you want to do a learner analysis because, it sounds like you're setting it up, not that, okay, so this is where Brenda, for me, I'm going to nerd out, because then this goes like, Brian, how, in that context of learning, is it going to be more behaviorist, where someone's going to be lecturing to, let's say, the students, or will it be more constructivist, where everyone in a sense is considered a learner? Like,
It typically varies from visit to visit.
okay, so yeah, so then that, now when you're doing this needs assessment, you're like, okay, well, this is going to be very different. So for the sake of this project, because it's only like, it's an important project, but a piddly 3 to 5 page paper, you then need to identify, all right, well, I need to probably pinpoint what type of specific visit. So let's say it's the type of visit where everybody's a learner, where the scientist is going to learn from the students, and the students are going to learn from the facilitators, more kind of that constructivist background. Then you then have to analyze in your learner analysis, because everyone in that case is a learner. What are they like? So your scientists, can you tell us a little bit about your scientists? Like what kind of background do they have? Who are they?
Sure. So our institute focuses on Earth systems. So we have scientists that research air, water, land, and life. So we try to educate young Floridians on what's happening with Florida's environmental changes.
Okay, so then you have people, so these people are subject matter experts who've been around for a while, who for some years have X amount of knowledge, and your students are even like young Floridians too. And then when you say young, how young are they?
The whole spectrum of K-12.
Okay, so that's going to be fun because, oh, that's curious. So when someone goes into that, so like I'm imagining this virtual environment. So do you have like kindergartners to like high school seniors all on the same call?
Oh, not on the same call. No. So it's each teacher requests an individual visit, and then a scientist may go to a kindergarten classroom. Scientist may go to 7th grade,
Got
whoever
it.
the teacher is. But it's an open opportunity for any teacher K-12, as long as they teach in a public school in Florida.
Got it. So you're gonna have to, so this is why it's a full-time job, you know what I mean? Because then you're gonna have to like, ideally, probably by the time you're done with all the needs assessment, because this is not just going to be one, it's going to be, you can even almost categorize it to like, this is a kindergarten virtual visit constructivist needs assessment. this is a first grade, or you might even categorize them. So for those of you who've done adolescent psychology or elementary student psychology, you know, there are different levels of like children development. So, you know, so your K to second grade might be then a certain type of needs assessment because, you know, psychologically they're developed in a certain way. And even how you would tailor your learning materials, like you probably are like, teachers in the class, teachers on the call, I think, what is it? For every age, the student's attention span is 5 minutes, something to that effect. So if your child, or I think it's even less, like basically if a child's 6, I think their attention span is maybe no more than like 10 minutes, you know, so then your learning materials are going to be like, oh, great, I got to jam all this in 10 minutes. Whereas if you're working with seniors, then you're definitely going to create, like, your needs assessment is to create these learning materials that are potentially longer. So I hope that helps. So do you all see how even just there, it wasn't necessarily a formal needs assessment, but by this kind of question asking, you know, we kind of hit all those different sections of the learner analysis, the contextual analysis, and then even that task analysis of now that, okay, if we're focusing on kindergartners, what are the tasks that we need to do to be able to achieve these goals? You know, you might need to, but first, before necessarily assuming that you know what a kindergartner needs, you probably need to talk to one, right? And I think that's something that we kind of all experienced where I think, and I'm sorry, I don't want to necessarily be political here, but I think all the teachers in this call probably know that it's really aggravating when people who have never taught make decisions. And so so you just want to be like, okay, well, if I'm going to be designing things for kindergartners, I probably need to talk to a kindergartner. And then you'll probably be thoroughly enlightened and you're like, yep, that idea would never have worked. So anyways, so Brian, I think hopefully that helps to kind of, or everyone, I hope that kind of helps to kind of show that the potential formatting of things is not necessarily a universal format, but even just breaking down how we can, as instructional designers, know what people need to know. Okay, all right, so there's been some more questions, so I don't want to necessarily linger too much. Let's see. Andrew, about the interview with the ID, should we put our interview questions? Also, do we need to write their answers at the end of the assignment and devote the actual 2 pages to our reflection? Yes. I want to hear from you in this class, and this again is based more on my experience, and quite frankly, when teachers, you know, when you're a teacher, you can do whatever you want. But when I was in grad school, like I hated, it's going to be so ironic, I hated writing, you know, just like, because I was trained to be a journalist. So I'm like, I can say all this in 1 page. Why do I have to say it in 15? So, but when, have any of you taken a class with Albert Ritzhaupt? Do you know who Albert Ritzhaupt is? Okay, I think he's one of the advisors, or for some of you. He just made us do 2-page papers like every day. I mean, not every day, that would be excessive. Every week. And it just kind of built up that skill and that exercise of just being able to crank out and write a lot. Even though, so now like 2 pages isn't that much anymore, you know? So, so that's my hope of just getting you all to just write, you know, spit out your answers and then correct the questions and the answers you can put at the end. And this is going to be more of a trust system. So if some of you, for example, wrote down notes, I'm not necessarily expecting you to take pictures of the notes and putting it at the end. I'm expecting you to do a reflection and trusting that you actually did an interview or you actually watched the videos. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're all adults now. I mean, you're only kind of cheating yourself if you're not. So, so I hope that answers your question, Andrew. Megan. Okay, let me see if it did. Okay, yeah, I hope so, Andrew. Megan, I am having trouble not writing learning objectives for the task analysis. Can you give me some points on the difference between task analysis versus learning objectives? Thanks. So, in my opinion, the task analysis is going to be just a general idea of what you think you need to do to be able to achieve something versus necessarily the learning objectives. This is going to be kind of in the gray area between instructional theory and learning theory. Whereas as a teacher, which is also very much involved with an instructional designer, in week 5, we're going to be going over learning objectives, how to write good learning objectives. But more so when you're an instructional designer, think of yourself more as someone in industry. So it might just be semantics. But if you're like an instructional designer in industry and you're like, oh yeah, let me do these learning objectives. Not that people wouldn't understand you, but their understanding of learning objectives is going to be way different than the teachers in the classroom. So when you're like a task analysis, basically, I'm going to tell you what we need to do to achieve our goal. People understand that better. So I would say this as probably also to the teachers in the classroom or in this call right now. When we've interviewed instructional designers for instructional design positions at my department, that's probably one of the things that kind of have to be teased out, where you're coming in with an education background, good learning objectives, how to write a good learning objective, how to write your lesson plans to show how students will be able to, which is going to be great, and which is why it helps constitute good instructional designers. But you're not going to be teaching a class, and you're not going to be making lesson plans. You're going to have to be in a situation with either faculty or clients who are just needing to know, like, how are you going to help me achieve this? So there's going to be a little bit of teasing out, a little bit of semantics change to help, be in that environment. And actually, we probably lean more towards industry versus necessarily teaching education in K-12. So they're not necessarily different, but task analysis has more of the practical how am I going to, whereas lesson objectives are more skill-based. But it may not always be so. So for those of you who are teaching in vocational school, if you ever teach in a vocational school, you might be like, oh, I'm going to teach HTML to students so they can design a web page. That's technical. But the task analysis might be like, okay, I'm going to have to set up class time to be able to, so, I'm going to have to carve out task time. I'm going to have to send out emails or flyers to let people know when these trainings are. So does that make sense? So your learning objective will be more skill-based, whereas your task will be like, how am I even going to achieve what I want people to do?
So really, you mean broad versus fine is really what you're saying.
I probably, instead of broad versus fine, I would be more of like objective versus subjective. So if, because with learning objectives, you're just focused on the learning, that they know how to do something. Whereas task might be like, think of more like event planning. Like in order for you to have a wedding or whatever, it's like, I gotta hire the caterers. I gotta make sure that I get money from so-and-so and give money to so-and-so. That's going to be your tasks that you can then list out and potentially delegate to others, which is almost an entirely different realm than learning objectives.
So I want to clarify. So if the learning objective is like, if for students to understand do certain things, and my task analysis will become, I need to first create a material to show of like the actual instructional manual with like all the steps tapped out. and then attach screenshots of each step, record a
That-
video of myself demonstrating how to do that, and then they're gonna create an actual assessment to see if students were able to do that. So
Right.
students' learning objective will be students can show me how to do certain things on the platform, while my task analysis will be I need to do these things to achieve what I want students to do.
Right. So I would say you got it. So I would say if people were trying to, I would say learning objectives would be more associated with goal analysis than necessarily task analysis. If that helps, Megan.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because especially if you're going to be an instructional designer in a larger company, like you'll need to know, okay, I've created my task analysis that match to these goals. You're a senior instructional designer, you're going to tackle the more complicated tasks, and like maybe the ones that are more elementary level, you can give to an ed tech or a more junior person that's learning some of those things. And so, yeah. So I see you, Casey. So Casey's helped out with us at the Center for Online Innovation Production. So she's kind of experienced this too, where we have this whole goal of trying to build a course. And, you've helped out with our colleague, Brian. And then, when he's just like, okay, I got the content, Casey, can you put this in Canvas? So that was part of the tasking of what we needed to do to get things done. So kind of like that. I'm just going to call you out because I see you. So, all right. So let's move on. I think I have one more question, and I can stay on for however long. But again, if you guys need to go, it's like dinner time, and you have a life. Totally feel free to. Emily, related to Megan's question above, when the template says identify the appropriate skills needed for each step of the instructional design process, does that refer to skills needed by the students or by someone else? So that's good, because then when you think about the needs and the learner analysis, that's going to be, again, related to that. So if, to Erica's point, if students need to achieve this, but there's some, it was kind of a funny, it's not a funny joke, but like, how there's certain words that teachers say all the time. And so we kind of would joke around like, we should take a shot for like words that are buzzwords that are said. So I'm about to say one, scaffolding. If you need to like scaffold anybody to be able to do something, then yes, that should be included as one of the tasks. Yep, cool. Let's see, Amy, would you mind talking a bit more about the peer review article for this week? What do you mean when you say what research has been done about ID? Got it. Okay, so in our field, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the practicality of things. Like, okay, I'm going to go build something. And it's sometimes you'll see with one of the learning instructional design methods, rapid prototyping, things can be super fast. And it may not be as long as an academic process. But let's be honest, we're also a graduate level course. Some of you are going for higher level degrees. So I can't necessarily just keep it purely at the training kind of practical level. So I do want you all, if you're interested in being a professor or staying in academia, to be able to see what instructional design research has been conducted. Amy, then it would be like going into Google Scholar or going to any of the library databases, just to, because I love that, because it's an intro course, it's an introduction course. So just for you all to kind of go and explore, okay, well, what research has been done about instructional design or about instructional designers? Because this is related to module 3 that's focusing on the who in instructional design. So I kind of wanted you all to see what research has been done about instructional designers. I would say it's still not a lot, because frankly, everyone's too busy to do research on us, so you may not find a lot of articles. So some of you may be writing about the same ones, and hopefully, I don't know, we'll see whether or not you get matched with someone who read the same thing. But to kind of see what research is done out there, to have like an academic lens, then, because I know a lot of what I'm telling you is very practical, but then also like from evidence-based research what people are saying instructional designers do, or how do they think, or how do they continue, with their work, or how do they do it well, and what do they have to do. So from an academic level, and to see if you're interested in the future to do research about instructional design or instructional designers, you've at least read at least one article. Well, actually, you'll read two, because one from you and one from your peer.
Could it possibly be a critique of some sort? Like if it's an article that's maybe looking at like flaws in instructional design or something?
Oh, yeah, sure. So
Okay.
the hypothesis that is presented in the paper could be about anything. It could be about a critique about instructional designers. I mean, the hypothesis that someone might have might be like, instructional designers are totally not needed in the education system. I mean, that could totally. But then for your paper, you don't necessarily need to critique the paper. I just basically want to hear what you learned, what you thought interesting. What did you think going into reading the paper, or by just reading the abstract and the title and then actually reading the evidence, or sometimes it might just not necessarily be super exciting. You're like, oh, well, at least my thoughts about instructional design are confirmed. So if it's not anything new, at least you have your ideas confirmed.
Do you care whether the article is centered on instructional design as a profession versus instructional design like a process that occurred?
Sure. I'll be honest, I think I was more thinking about instructional designers, like the people. But if you do the process, I think that's fine, because I think it's also hard to divorce the process from the people. Like someone had to do it, So I think that'll be more of an indirect thing. But yeah, just getting you more used to academic literature related to instructional design is my ultimate goal with this assignment. Okay, cool. Bye. I think Jacqueline left. Thank you. All right, Jordan. The cover letter. Cool. Before I go on from the cover letter, please use Grammarly. Please use whatever you need to do to make sure that you checked your grammar, because I still got a cover letter this week where I was like, you didn't capitalize. You didn't capitalize, like certain things, or like Florida. Florida is capital F, capital L, if you're using that kind of abbreviation. So I know it sounds super nitpicky, but in our line of work, it's kind of like what we do. Because if we don't do it, the instructors we work with aren't going to do it. The students obviously don't really care. So I mean, that's being more of a jaded kind of expression, but the polished product that we have to do kind of really demands us to kind of be nitpicky. So that's why, I'll be giving advice about that. So for the purpose of the assignment, we are allowed to embellish our job experience to match the requirements of the job posting. For example, most of the instructional design positions in K-12 require several years of teaching experience, but this is my first year. How about this? Unless it is needed, potentially for like your final ID project where you're going to kind of have some placeholders or filler, I, as much as possible, want you to create things that aren't fake. Reason being, because I want you to be able to take it and use it for whatever situation. So this is your dream job. You're pretending you're going to, apply for this job that requires years of experience. I probably would approach it to like, I'm writing it so that once I get those years of experience, I can just submit it as is. I mean, granted, you can probably add more things that you've achieved since then, but whatever you can right now to sell what you have achieved already. That way I can see, okay, this is a job posting that she wants. If you want to write me a little note being like, hey, Brenda, I know I don't have 3 years of experience. This is my first year. Or I don't have a master's degree yet, and I know this requires a master's, but this is my cover letter. This is what I want to do. Then one, you have it ready. or at least you have something that you could then use for someone that didn't need 3 years or didn't need a master's. So basically you have a cover letter ready to go if you needed it. That could maybe only require minor tweaking to the job you're applying for. And that's something that I can also give you feedback for, being like, oh, this is great. You know, you talk really well about yourself, but you know, you might want to also include something that about the company, showing that you know something about the company, you're interested. Also, please double check who you're writing your cover letter to, because I've also gotten some who are like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to work for Florida State University. And I am like, oh no, you didn't. Because I mean, of all the universities you could have put down, you don't put the one that is one that we don't necessarily like. So
That's an automatic F.
exactly.
That's an automatic fail.
Oh, that's not even a fail, Chris. That was someone applying for a job.
No.
That was like a real cover letter.
Unacceptable.
I was like, oh no. I was like, I mean, I don't want to say that was a reject pile, but it was the pile that we are not going to continue interviewing.
Let me give the feedback on that one.
Okay,
I got stuff to say.
Okay. Be like, we I was like, oh man. And it's hard, especially when you're out of state. I think it was a person who was out of state, you know. So if you're gonna go apply for a place at like California, you want to make sure if it's part of UC something or like CS something, you know, for if you're familiar with the California systems. Anyways, but yes, Chris, yes. All right, let's see what else. Okay, Jessica was thinking the same thing. Great, glad it helped. See, this time is very helpful. Casey, I think ducked out. Jordan ducked. No, Jordan's still here. Hi, Jordan. Okay. I hope that's been helpful. I mean, I'm happy to stay on, but is anybody else have any questions? Candace, I know we're meeting, but yeah. Okay. Well, please feel free to enjoy your life outside of class. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate seeing you. I didn't want to go through class without actually seeing you guys live, because it has happened in the past. And when I actually do meet people live, I feel embarrassed that I haven't met them synchronously. Oh yeah. If anyone wants to meet with me personally, just always feel free to send me an email, and maybe some times that are good for you, and we'll make it work. I will say that I have a full-time job, so during work hours is not impossible. I can try to, you know, fit you in during lunch, but preferably at like 4:30 and after. I'll try. And then also, like I know with Candace, if I have a fireside chat, I can just meet after the fireside chat too, so that could help.
Dr. Such, I do have one more question.
Yeah, sure, Andrew.
This is about the task analysis, just making sure that I kind of have that down.
Yeah.
It is about what we would want them to do and how specific that is, but are we getting into something as specific as the example in the book where they describe how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
No, and that's why you also want to be careful about your need. And so when Brian and I were going over that exercise, if we stayed at that very high level, that task analysis list is going to be like super huge, you know. But the more that you can kind of pare down, where it's not necessarily as elementary as the peanut butter jelly sandwich, although so as defined, as much as you can define your problem will also help minimize how much that task analysis will be. Now, is it going to be super nitty gritty, like person must pick up pen, person must make sure pen has ink? Yeah, don't get to that level, but just as at like, if I'm working with you and let's say I'm your supervisor and I'm like, hey, Andrew, and great job identifying they need, what do we really need to do to make sure we meet that need? And you can give me a list.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. And then one more question about the learner analysis. Do we need to do an analysis specifically on the learners, or could we use previous research that would make sense for that topic? Say I'm doing something on employees learning about, psychological concepts. Would I be able to just pull research that says these are characteristics of employees, their lifestyles, where they work, things like that? Or does it need to be more specific?
Yeah. I think that's good, but I also would have to determine like what you've identified as your need. So for example, if you were like employees at Steak and Shake, for some reason that's the first thing that came to mind. The data about employees may not necessarily fit employees at Steak and Shake. So you also want to make sure that the data you're pulling is kind of in the same ballpark as the people that you've identified in your needs assessment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
that's it. Sorry for interrupting the closing of the meeting.
No. I mean, and no one's a captive person, so except for maybe Candace. But but yeah. Thank you all very much. And if you have anything, you know how to find me.
Thank you.
That's right. Go Gators. Go